Welcome to another deep dive, and this one is taking us straight into the heart of the AI world. Specifically, we're talking about DeepSeek R1. This model has been making waves, even turning heads at some of the big tech companies. You know, the usual suspects like NVIDIA and Microsoft. And Mark Andreessen, well, he called it China's AI Sputnik moment. Pretty bold statement, right?
Yeah, it definitely got people's attention.
So we're diving deep, trying to figure out if a model built for, get this, under $6 million can actually go toe-to-toe with the AI giants out there. And, of course, what that means for the whole future of AI, where things are headed.
It's definitely shaking things up, that's for sure. And yeah, that comparison to Sputnik, it's interesting. It kind of highlights, I think, how disruptive DeepSeek R1 could be, how it could change the game.
Okay, so first things first.
Yeah.
What exactly is DeepSeek R1? It's being called a distilled language model, but what does that even mean?
So imagine you have these massive AI models like GPT-4, for example. They're trained on a ridiculous amount of data, right?
Right.
Well, DeepSeek R1, it uses this technique called distillation. Basically, it learns from these giants, these huge models, but without needing to store all that data themselves. Instead of like copying the entire data set, it focuses on replicating the outputs, how the big models respond to different tasks.
So it's more about learning the how than
Right.
memorizing every single detail. Okay, that makes sense, especially when you consider how much cheaper it was to develop.
Exactly. And speaking of cost, DeepSeek R1's developers say they pull this off for under $6 million. That's peanuts compared to what Western companies are pouring in, places like OpenAI, Anthropic, are talking billions.
Wow, that's a huge difference. Okay, so we have a model that's potentially way more efficient cost-wise. But can it actually perform? Can this distilled model keep up with the big leagues, the ones that have been dominating the field?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, or should I say the $6 million question, and it's what's causing all this buzz. Early tests, they suggest DeepSeek R1 can match, and sometimes even beat, the performance of those top American models on certain benchmarks.
Interesting. So how does this distillation process actually work? I mean, in practice.
Okay, so picture this. A panel of AI experts, each one a specialist in their own area. DeepSeek R1, it's learning from this whole group, picking up the best tricks and strategies from each expert. This is what we call multimodal training.
Okay.
And it allows DeepSeek to be more adaptable, more robust. It's drawing on the combined knowledge of its teachers, so to speak.
So it's almost like it's learning to think critically, right? By considering all these different perspectives. It's not just about brute force memorization. It's about understanding the underlying logic.
Exactly. And in one of those sources you shared, there was this retired software engineer, Dave, I think his name was. He actually tested DeepSeek R1 himself. He ran all sorts of tests, even trying the model on different hardware, like even a Raspberry Pi.
Wait, a Raspberry Pi, that little computer that hobbyists mess around with.
Yeah, that's the one. And this is a big deal, you see. It highlights another key aspect of DeepSeek R1. It's designed to run on consumer-grade hardware.
So it's not just about matching performance. It's about making powerful AI accessible to pretty much anyone.
Exactly. Think about the possibilities. We could have AI models tailored to specific industries, running on local hardware, which would be great for privacy, and maybe even integrated into our everyday devices like smartphones.
So instead of being limited to these massive data centers, the power of AI could be in everyone's hands. Kind of like what happened with personal computers, right? Powerful tech became available to the masses, and it sparked a whole revolution in innovation and accessibility.
You got it. That's a great comparison. DeepSeek R1 has that same potential, to democratize AI in a similar way.
It's exciting for sure. But before we get carried away, let's talk about the limitations. I mean, we've talked about all the potential benefits, but are there any trade-offs we need to think about? Is this distilled approach all it's cracked up to be?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, right? There are some potential downsides to consider.
Like what? Give me the rundown.
Well, one concern is that smaller models, they can be more prone to errors. Sometimes they generate responses that sound confident but are actually wrong.
So like a student who crammed for a test, they might know the basics, but get tripped up when things get more complex.
Exactly. And then there's the question of scalability, whether this distilled approach can keep up with how fast AI is advancing. Will DeepSeek R1 be able to handle the increasingly complex tasks and data sets we're going to be throwing at it in the future?
So we're in this wait-and-see mode. It's exciting, but there are still a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, exactly. But one thing's for sure, DeepSeek R1 has changed the game. It's making us rethink our assumptions about AI development, about who can access it, and even about the global balance of power in the field.
And that brings us to the elephant in the room, the impact on American AI. DeepSeek R1 has definitely put some pressure on companies like OpenAI, Google, Microsoft. But before we get into that, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back to unpack the implications of DeepSeek R1 on the AI landscape. Okay, so we're back and ready to dive into how DeepSeek R1 is shaking things up in the AI world, especially for American AI companies. I mean, this feels like a pretty big deal.
Oh, yeah, definitely. DeepSeek R1, it's kind of thrown a wrench in the works, challenging the whole power dynamic we've been seeing in AI.
For a while there, it seemed like companies like OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, they were calling the shots. But now, with DeepSeek R1 on the scene, what does this mean for them? What happens to their business models, their whole dominance in the field?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is to how they make money, their revenue models. A lot of these US AI companies, they depend on subscriptions, APIs, essentially charging people for access to their models.
Right.
But DeepSeek R1, it's open source, which means it's free to use, free to adapt, you don't got to pay for it.
So it's like offering a free buffet when you're running a fancy five-star restaurant. You're going to have some serious competition.
Yeah.
But it's not just about market share, is it? It feels like there's a bigger shift happening, a potential power shift in who controls the future of AI.
Yeah, you're right. That's a really important point. Because DeepSeek R1 being open source, it could really accelerate AI adoption globally. And that could mean US developed models, they might not be as dominant as they once were.
Okay, so what about the stock market? Investors, they tend to freak out, when there's a disruption like this. What are they saying about the potential impact on companies tied to AI, especially those that depend on like AI licensing and infrastructure?
There's definitely a lot of caution out there right now. Companies that rely heavily on AI licensing, cloud infrastructure, even hardware like NVIDIA chips, which are crucial for AI development, they could be in for a bumpy ride.
It's wild how one model developed for, comparatively very little money could have such a ripple effect across the entire AI ecosystem.
It really shows you the power of open source tech, how it can shake things up, even in industries that seem really established.
And speaking of shaking things up, there's this theory going around about that crazy low development cost we were talking about.
Oh, yeah, you mean the whole SCUP theory thing?
Yeah, that's the one.
Oh.
Some people think there might be more to the story.
Right. It's not so much a conspiracy theory, but more of a different way of looking at things. Basically, it suggests that China might be downplaying the resources and costs that actually went into developing DeepSeek R1.
So it's like they're playing poker,
Yeah.
and they've just shown a really strong hand, and everyone's wondering if they're bluffing or if they have an even better hand hidden away.
Exactly. The idea is that they're trying to disrupt the Western AI landscape, maybe create a false sense of security while they continue to pour money into AI development behind the scenes.
That's a pretty bold strategy if it's true.
Yeah.
So we're left with a lot of questions about DeepSeek R1. Is it truly a groundbreaking achievement made on a shoestring budget? Or is it a calculated move to shake up the whole global AI order?
I guess only time will tell. But one thing's for sure, DeepSeek R1 has made us rethink our assumptions about AI development, about how accessible it is, and about the balance of power in this field. But, beyond all the geopolitical stuff, I think it's important to look at the practical impact DeepSeek R1 could have.
Yeah, that's a good point. We've been focusing on the big picture, but what about the real benefits this technology could bring, regardless of who created it or why?
Right, let's talk about that democratization aspect we mentioned earlier. Imagine a world where small businesses, researchers in developing countries, even individual innovators, they all have access to powerful AI tools without the cost or infrastructure barriers. I mean, that can unlock a wave of creativity and problem solving we haven't even begun to think about.
It's like everyone suddenly gets a superpower. Instead of AI being controlled by just a few powerful players, it becomes a shared resource that anyone can use to tackle all sorts of challenges, like healthcare, education, sustainability. The possibilities are endless.
Exactly. With DeepSeek R1 running on affordable hardware, readily available hardware, we could see AI-powered diagnostic tools reaching remote communities. We could see personalized learning experiences tailored to each student, and maybe even innovative solutions to problems like climate change and resource management. Making this technology more accessible, it could really accelerate progress in addressing some of the biggest challenges we face.
It's a good reminder that technology itself isn't good or bad. It's just a tool. And it's up to us to decide how we use it, what kind of impact it has on the world. DeepSeek R1 has definitely started an important conversation about the role of AI, its potential benefits and risks, and the global forces shaping its development. But let's not forget about the individual. How can our listener, someone who's clearly interested in this topic, explore DeepSeek R1 further and maybe even become a part of shaping its future?
That's a great question. And the beauty of open source technology is that it encourages participation. The source code, documentation, even tutorials for DeepSeek R1, it's all available online. And there are these active online communities where people are sharing their experiences, talking about the implications, and collaborating on new projects.
So it's not just about watching from the sidelines, it's about getting involved, experimenting, joining the conversation. If this deep dive has piqued your interest, I definitely encourage you to delve deeper into the world of DeepSeek R1 and see where it takes you.
Absolutely. And as you explore, keep asking yourself that so what question. What does this technology mean for your life, your community, the world as a whole?
Yeah.
How can we use AI to solve problems, make lives better, create a more just and sustainable future?
We've covered a lot in this deep dive, from the technical nuts and bolts of DeepSeek R1 to its potential impact on the global AI scene. But as we wrap things up, I want to leave you with one final thought to consider. If DeepSeek R1 is just the beginning, what's next for open source AI? How will this shift towards accessibility and collaboration shape the next generation of AI models? And what role will you play in this exciting new frontier?
We've been exploring the potential of DeepSeek R1 and, all the waves it's making in the AI world. But earlier we talked about some potential limitations, with this distilled approach. Are these just kind of growing pains, things that'll work themselves out as the tech gets better? Or could they, hold DeepSeek R1 back in the long run?
That's a really important question. And honestly, it's something the whole AI community is trying to figure out right now. The early performance is exciting, don't get me wrong, but we need to see how DeepSeek R1 handles, the messy real-world stuff over time. It's like, think of it like watching a rookie athlete with tons of potential. The real test is consistency. Can they keep delivering? So are we saying it's too early to call it whether this distilled AI is the future?
It's not about making predictions, I think. It's more about understanding how all the pieces fit together. And that's where DeepSeek R1 being open source, that's a big advantage. By making the code and training data available, they're basically crowdsourcing the development of the model.
That's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah.
So instead of a small team working on their own, you have this global network of researchers, developers, hobbyists even, all contributing to the project. It's like a giant brain trust pushing the technology forward.
Exactly. This open approach, it means they can identify and fix problems way faster, potentially leading to, much better versions of DeepSeek R1 down the line.
We talked about the impact on big companies. That's kill stop theory, remember? But I keep thinking about the democratization aspect, how DeepSeek R1 is changing who has access to this kind of AI.
Yeah, it's a huge shift. Think about it. Researchers in developing countries, small businesses without a lot of money, even just regular people with good ideas, they can all experiment with and use powerful AI now. This has the potential to level the playing field, and who knows what incredible innovations will come from that.
It's like opening a door that used to be locked. And now all these people can walk through it and see what they can create.
Exactly. It's what makes this so exciting. DeepSeek R1, it's not just a new piece of tech. It's a whole new way of thinking about AI development, making it more open, more collaborative, more accessible.
It really shows that innovation can come from anywhere, and that the future of AI, well, it's not set in stone. We're shaping it right now with every choice we make. This has been an amazing deep dive into DeepSeek R1. Thanks for joining us as we explored this cutting-edge AI and how it could change everything.
It's been a pleasure being here. And remember, this is just the beginning. Stay curious, stay engaged. Who knows, maybe you'll be the one to make the next big AI breakthrough.